You think you could survive in ancient Egypt with your air conditioning, your antibiotics, and your $9 iced coffee. Well, think again. You might imagine yourself as a pharaoh, reclining in the shade of a golden palace. But in reality, you'd be lucky to make it past breakfast if you even knew what was safe to eat. From the scorching desert sun, to parasites in your water, to gods you better not offend. Ancient Egypt was not built for you. The clothes are scratchy, the laws are brutal, and oh yeah, you probably smell awful. But that's the least of your problems. So grab your linen loincloth and hope you're not mistaken for a servant, because here's why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. You open your eyes, but the sun's already waiting for you. Not just light heat. Aggressive, ancient, and inescapable. It pours through the windowless slits in the wall like molten air. You're lying on a rough mat woven from palm fibers, your back sore, your skin sticky. There's no softness, no pillow, no blankets, just dust, sweat, and the faint scratching of insects inside the walls. You sit up, slowly. Your bones ache from sleeping on the packed earth floor. Your neck is stiff, and you're already thirsty. The kind of dry that feels like sand is coating your tongue. You reach for a ceramic jar in the corner. It holds what passes for water scooped from the Nile, cloudy, lukewarm, and stale. You don't know it, but it's swimming with bacteria, parasites, and the occasional microscopic hicker that'll be drilling into your intestines by noon. But you drink anyway, because the alternative is passing out by mid-morning. You're not royalty. You're not even a priest. You're just a commoner. One of the thousands living under the crushing weight of Pharaoh's rule. In a world so old that your version of now is closer in time to the invention of the iPhone than it is to the construction of the pyramids, everything around you is made of mud, wood, or stone. There is no metal cutlery, no glass windows, no doors that click shut. Just reed mats to cover entryways and piles of dry dung burning in the distance for fuel. Outside, the streets are narrow alleys packed with bodies. Barefoot children run around, their faces caked with dust. Goats scream. Dogs fight over scraps. Flies are everywhere. They're not an annoyance, they're part of the scenery. And then the smell hits you. It's everything all at once: human waste, animal carcasses, river rot, body odor, unwashed clothes, open sores, fermented beer, and fire smoke. It's not just unpleasant, it's overwhelming. You can taste it. It gets into your lungs and stays there. You try to step outside, shielding your eyes from the blinding sun. The sand doesn't crunch, it sizzles. You're wearing a linen kilt tied around your waist, and nothing else. No shoes. The ground burns your feet. But this is what you wear, not because it's fashionable, but because anything here would roast you alive. And even this isn't clean. It hasn't been washed in days. Water is precious, and soap is unheard of. Now comes your task for the day. You're a laborer. You haul stones, or you farm. Or maybe, if you're unlucky, you're part of a crew maintaining a royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings, not building one. Just keeping it sealed and protected from the desert's wrath. Your job is whatever the overseer says it is, and arguing isn't an option. You walk to the granary to collect your daily bread and beer, your payment. Money doesn't exist in the way you understand it. You're paid in rations, calculated down to the loaf. One mistake, one day of missed work, and that's the difference between dinner and starvation. Your bread is dense, flat, and full of grit from the grinding stones. Every bite slowly destroys your teeth. You're in your 20s, but your molars are already cracked and worn. You chew slowly because chewing hurts. The beer is flat, thick, and sour. It's not a treat, it's survival. Water can kill you. Beer, at least, is fermented enough to be safe. And while you eat, you sweat, constantly. There is no escape from the heat. You wipe your forehead, and it's immediately soaked again. The sun reflects off the stone walls, turning every corner of the village into a furnace. There's no shade, no AC, not even a breeze unless you're near the river, and even that brings its own dangers. Crocodiles, hippos, and river-borne diseases wait for anyone foolish enough to wade in. You think of asking for a break, but there's no such word. You work until the job is done or until the overseer stops shouting. He carries a stick. He doesn't mind using it. The scars on your back prove that. And always, overhead, the gods are watching. Or so you're told. Miss a ritual, offend the wrong idol, spill a few grains from the offering table. That's not just bad luck, that's divine punishment. Illness, plague, infertility, all sent from above. If not, the cosmic balance is disrupted. And you're not even sure what you've done. You just know your neighbor's child died last week, and people are starting to whisper. You join the other workers heading toward the fields or construction site, feet dragging, stomach uneasy from the gritty bread and lukewarm beer. The sun has barely crested the sky, and already your back is slick with sweat. The linen wrapped around your waist clings to you, and you can feel new blisters forming on your heels with each step on the hot ground. There's no such thing as comfort here, only survival. You pass by a scribe sitting under the meager shade of a sycamore fig, marking inventory on a piece of ostraka. He doesn't lift a finger, he doesn't have to. In this world, writing is power. You can't read and you never will. Literacy is a sacred tool, jealously guarded by the priests and the scribes. You could work until your hands are bone, and still never earn the right to write your own name. Your job today is moving stones again, huge blocks, dragged by hand or slid along greased wooden beams. You're part of a long line of bodies, all bent under the same weight, grunting in rhythm as the overseer barks orders. The heat is off the stones like breath. Your hands are calloused, but it doesn't matter. Rough edge is sliced through your skin like reed knives. Blood beads, then dries almost instantly in the dry, baking wind. There is no conversation, just the sound of groaning wood, the scrape of rock, and the hiss of the wind against the cliffs. You steal a glance upward at the horizon. Beyond the fields and palm trees lies the Nile, its water glinting like polished obsidian under the sun. It is life and death both. The floods that feed your crops can also drown them. When the water is too low, famine creeps in. When it's too high, whole villages vanish. You remember the stories of years when the Nile turned cruel, when the sky withheld the rain and the people resorted to desperate measures. You whisper a quick prayer to Happy, the Nile god, hoping it's enough to keep the river generous this year. You don't know if he's listening. You don't know if he's real. But belief isn't optional, it's stitched into every part of your life. Gods are everywhere, in the wind, in the stones, in the disease that took your brother last winter, and the pregnancy your sister hides now under loose linen. Around mid-day, you're given a break, if you can call it that. You crouch in the thin shade of a half-finished wall, gnawing on another piece of bread that cracks your teeth more than it fills your stomach. You drink your beer ration still warm, still bitter, and try not to think about the day still ahead. There's no time for rest. No union, no safety net. You work until you're done, or until you drop. By the afternoon, your back is screaming, your vision swimming, and your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. But stopping isn't an option. Falling behind means the whip. The overseer carries a split-tipped lash made from dried hippopotamus hide. You've seen it split skin in a single stroke. You've felt it too, everyone has, so you keep going. One more block. One more drag, one more ire. When the sun finally begins to dip behind the palm trees, it doesn't bring relief, just new problems. Mosquitoes rise like smoke from the canals and reeds. You slap at them, but they find your skin anyway. Malaria, dengue, diseases without names, they don't care how tired you are. Back in your village, the streets are darker now, the smells sharper. You pass a small shrine where a priest chants a hymn to Ra, the sun god. The incense is thick and choking, made from imported resin that only the temple can afford. You're not allowed inside, of course, the gods live there. You wait outside and hope the gods notice you from the corners of their eyes. You reach your home, if you can call it that, a single room made from mud brick, shared with 4 others. There's no privacy, no real bedding, no light but a flickering oil lamp. Your skin is cracked from the sun, your hands blistered and raw. You sit, pick at a bowl of lentils, and try not to think about tomorrow. Your neighbor tells you about a man who stole from the grain store and got caught. His punishment, mutilation, no trial, no defense. Just an example made in the square by order of the temple. The grain belonged to the gods, and stealing from the gods is the fastest way to lose your place in the afterlife. Which reminds you, your soul isn't safe either. When you die, and everyone dies young here, you'll be judged. Not by people, by the divine. They say Anubis will weigh your heart against the feather of moth. If you lied, stole, hurt others, if your heart is too heavy, it will be devoured by Amat, the soul leader. No paradise, no rebirth, just oblivion. You'll vanish from history, erased from memory. The worst fate imaginable in a culture obsessed with legacy. To avoid this, you must be buried properly, with the right spells, the right rituals, the right objects. But you can't afford any of them. You'll be lucky if your body ends up in a shallow grave outside the village. No embalming, no priest, just dirt. The wealthy will be mummified, wrapped in linen, entombed with jewelry and food, surrounded by symbols and charms. You'll have to rely on the hope that someone remembers your name, because if they don't, your care soul will wander restless for eternity. And still, somehow, you get up the next morning and do it all again. Because in ancient Egypt, survival is its own kind of worship, and the gods are always watching. You wake before dawn the next day, not because you want to, but because your body has no other choice. The air is thick with dust, and the faint scent of dung-fueled fires smoldering somewhere nearby. There is no rooster, no gentle sunrise, just the cold truth of another day, same as the last, waiting to be endured. Before your feet even touch the ground, you're scratching again. The itching never stops. Your sleeping mat is infested. Your tunic, even when washed in river water, carries lice-like memories. No soap, no antiseptic. Just vinegar, if you're lucky, and prayers to tower it, the goddess of childbirth and domestic protection, to spare you from another night of torment. You consider skipping breakfast to save your ration, but you know better. The labor ahead requires every scrap of energy. Bread again, this time stiffer, darker, and chewier than yesterday. You crack a molar on a grain of sand, mixed into the flour grit from the hand, ground millstones that no one bothers to clean too well. A slow rot has already begun deep in your jaw, the kind that will fester until one day your face swells and splits with infection. You'll have no medicine for that, no help. The healer's best remedy, a spell and a poultice made of honey, charcoal, and if you can afford it, treat mouse. As you leave the house, you pass by an old woman sitting, hunched in the doorway across from yours. She doesn't speak anymore. Her teeth are gone, her eyes clouded over. No one remembers how old she is. She's waiting to die, and no one interferes. She'll either fade away quietly, or be carried out when the smell becomes too strong to ignore. Outside, the children are already gathering water. Not clean water, Nile water, murky and brown, with bits of waste and vegetation floating on the surface. They scoop it into large ceramic jars, then hoist them onto their backs, tiny spines bending under the weight. This is normal. They've been trained since they could walk. Childhood ends early here. You see a man being dragged through the streets by two guards. His arms are bound, his mouth bleeding. You overhear whispers was caught speaking against the temple tax collectors. Foolish, in Egypt, the gods own everything, the land belongs to the gods, the food you grow, the gods' portion comes first. Even your body, in a way, is borrowed. To question that divine order is to mark yourself for ruin. You avert your eyes. That kind of punishment is public, brutal, and contagious. If you're seen sympathizing with him, you might be next. By mid-morning, the heat is unbearable. You're working the irrigation canals today, scooping mud from the ditches to ensure the water flows to the barley fields. The mud stinks, there's no drainage, no real sanitation. Human waste mixes with animal dung and rotting fish. You try not to breathe through your nose. Suddenly, your foot slips. You fall hard into the sludge. The laughter of nearby workers fades quickly when they see the wound on your leg. A gash, not deep, but it's already filling with filth. You rinse it with the very water you just dredged. It's all you have. By nightfall, it's already red and puffy. Back in the village, you find the healer. He gives you a paste made from frankincense ash and crocodile dung. It smells as bad as you expect. You wince as he packs it into the wound, murmuring the name of Sekhmet, goddess of war and healing. You don't argue, there's nothing else to try. You hobble home, praying the infection doesn't spread. You've seen what happens when it does: fever, swelling, hallucinations, death. Sometimes they bury you with your eyes open. The funerary rites are short if you're poor. No amulets, no gold. Maybe someone recites your name, maybe not. That night, the fever comes, your body shakes, you sweat and hallucinate. You see jackals in the corner of the room. You hear your mother's voice, though she's been gone for years. Outside, a hyena howls, and through it all, you wonder if this is it. If Anubis is waiting, if your heart is ready, if the scales will balance. You think of the feather. You think of the sins you committed, stealing a chicken once, lying to a foreman, saying a prayer without meaning it. You think of Ammon, waiting to consume your soul. You think of the field of reeds, eternal paradise that looks exactly like the place you're trying to survive now. Crops, labor, a river that never stops flowing, and no rest. Your fever breaks just before dawn. You wake up soaked, shaking, but alive. You look at your leg, the swelling has gone down, the healer's spell, be it worked, maybe it was just luck. But there's no time to wonder. The sun is rising, and work starts soon. Always, it starts again. There are no weekends. No holidays unless the priest says so. No freedom, unless you're lucky enough to die with a name that someone remembers and a coin to pay the ferryman. In ancient Egypt, you don't live, you endure. Would you like to keep going into what happens during plagues, temple life, or deeper into family and gender roles? As you limp toward the fields, leg aching, something in the air feels different. It's heavier, tense, like the Nile itself is holding its breath. The streets are quieter than usual, fewer children running, doors left half closed. You pass a woman throwing out old rush mats from her doorway. She doesn't speak. She's too focused on the faint stain darkening the fabric, a red smear like dried pomegranate juice, only it's not. Word begins to spread before noon. A sickness has come. No one says the word plague out loud. That would give it too much power. But everyone knows. A fever has reached the workers' camps, the ones near the border where foreign traders pass through. It starts with a cough, then source angry, weeping wounds that smell like rot before the body even dies. Then comes the blood, always the blood. By afternoon, 2 men from your work crew are missing. One of them, a young farmer, had been coughing for days. You remember him spitting on the ground near your foot. You remember thinking he looked pale. You try not to remember that now. The priests are already at work, chanting prayers, burning incense thick enough to make you choke. They say it's a curse from the gods' retribution for disobedience, for impure thoughts, for letting women speak too loudly at market, or letting grain rot in temple storerooms. The cause doesn't matter, the effect does. No one goes near the sick. Once you're marked, you're invisible. Even family won't risk it. Some are taken away by temple guards and never seen again. Others are found days later in their homes, eyes open, mouths full of dried blood and flies. The Nile keeps flowing, so does your work. You can't afford to stop, no one can. Fields must be irrigated, livestock fed, stone hauled, taxes paid. The gods don't care if your neighbor's skin is falling off in sheets. The overseer doesn't care if your brother is coughing up blood. Your rations are docked if you miss a day. If you don't eat, you don't live. And it's not just the plague. There's fear of something worse, sorcery. Whispers that someone cursed the village, that an unburied body brought chaos down upon everyone. That the gods have turned their faces away. The line between medicine and magic doesn't exist here. Illness isn't natural, it's intentional. Someone did this, someone summoned it, so suspicion grows. Women with knowledge of herbs are suddenly accused of hexes. A child born with a clubbed foot is said to be an omen. A dark, colored ibis flying over the fields at dusk. A sign that Thoth is displeased. The healer who treated your leg is gone 2 days, later dragged off by guards. His hut burned, no explanation, and in the temples, things are worse. You've never seen inside a major templianly, the outer courtyards where the commoners drop offerings of barley or carved figurines. But you've heard the stories. The high priests live in near luxury, fed well, treated with reverence, untouched by the labor and filth of daily life. They claim to speak directly to the gods, but even they can't stop this sickness. They try, of course. There are rituals that last hours, days. Bulls are sacrificed. Priests bathe 5 times a day, shave every inch of their bodies, draw sacred circles in the sand. But people still die, faster now. Whole households vanish in a week. You pass a funeral on your way back from the fields. A modest one. Women carrying a wrapped body, no chanting, no music. There's no time, no materials for proper mummification. No oil, no natron, no money. Just a shallow grave, a stone placed over the heart, and a few hurried prayers to Anubis to guide the soul through the Juat, the underworld. You wonder, if you died tonight, who would bury you? Would anyone remember your name? Would your heart be weighed fairly, or would it be heavy with things you didn't mean to do? Your dreams that night are strange. You walk through darkness with a torch that won't light. You hear jackals in the distance, laughing. You see the god Thoth, with the head of an ibis, writing your name into a scroll, and then crossing it out. Your mouth fills with dust. You scream, but no one hears. You wake up gasping, the fever creeping back. Your leg pulses with heat again. You curse, not out loud. That would be dangerous, but silently, in your thoughts, which you hope the gods can't read. You try a prayer anyway, to Sekhmet again, to anyone who's listening. Outside, the sun is already rising. Another day begins. The birds don't sing, the goats are quiet. Even the river seems to move more slowly, as if it's watching, waiting, deciding what to take next. The fever clings to you like a wet linen shroud. Your leg has begun to stink a sour, meaty smell that's impossible to ignore. Still, you rise, you have to. No one will excuse you for being sick. Illness isn't a medical condition here, it's a judgment. You've either offended the gods, consorted with demons, or been cursed by someone envious of your meager life. You drag yourself outside and blend into the flow of villagers moving toward their daily tasks. Everything is quieter than it used to be. The talk is hushed. Eyes are downcast. The mourning is constant and quiet, no loud wailing, no public processions. No time, the dead are piling up too quickly for ritual. You overhear 2 men talking as they haul tools across a field. One says his cousin was buried without a proper opening of the mouth. Ceremonia, sacred rite, meant to restore the dead's sense, is in the afterlife. No ceremony means the soul wanders, blind and mute, through the Jewat. That's worse than death. That's a spiritual erasure. You think of your own body rotting in some anonymous pit, your soul clawing its way through 1,000 miles of darkness, unable to speak your own name to the gods. And it hits you. In ancient Egypt, even death is a luxury. The elite nobles, priests, royalty go out like kings. Lavish funerals, mummification with imported myrrh and cedar oil, painted coffins, tombs lined with spells from the Book of the Dead, meant to guide them past the demons of the afterlife. Y'all be lucky if your corpse doesn't get dumped into the same trench as 10 others, swaddled in a rag soaked with beer, a pebble shoved between your lips in place of a sacred amulet. There's a woman in your village Setipenmet, who used to be a servant in a priest's household. She speaks rarely, walks with a stoop, but she knows things. They say she saw the embalming chambers in the great temple at Thebes. She described marble slabs and bronze hooks, sawdust, stuffed bodies, jars of human organs placed lovingly beside the dead. Setipen Mut laughs, sometimes bitterly, when she hears your neighbors speak of the field of reeds, the eternal paradise where good souls live forever among grain and family. She says the elite have already paid their way into it with gold and sacrifice. The rest of y'all be recycled, reborn as laborers again and again, always under someone else's feet. And she might be right, because everything in your world is about hierarchy. There's no escaping it. Even the gods are tiered Ra above all, then Osiris, then Isis, then the tricksters and devourers waiting at the bottom to catch the unworthy. And you are always unworthy. You pass a statue of Horus, chipped and burred, stained. You bow your head, whispering a short hymn, not because you believe hell help, but because if someone sees you not praying, they might accuse you of heresy. The punishment for impiety is severe. Public lashing, branding, sometimes exile, but exile isn't freedom. Exile is a slow death, alone in the desert, without name or nation. The fever returns that evening, hard. You shiver so violently your teeth clack. Your neighbor brings a priest, not for healing, for assessment. The priest stands over you, not touching, his hands wrapped in linen. He chants a spell meant to determine whether your soul is still yours. You try to focus on the words, but they blur together, strange syllables swimming in heat and light. When he leaves, he drops a black scarab amulet beside your mat. That's not a good sign. Black is the color of judgment, of transformation, of death. You try to sleep, but your dreams are nightmares. A desert of blood, your tongue turned to ash, gods with crocodile heads watching you silently from thrones of bone. When you wake, it's daylight again. You're alive, barely. The fever has broken, but your body feels hollow. Like something has been taken. You limp outside, the air is different, thick with incense. A major festival is approaching, Opet Festival, maybe. Or the Feast of the Valley. You can't keep track. The temple is preparing processions. The priests will carry golden statues of the gods through the streets. There will be music and dancing. The rich will eat honeyed cakes and grilled duck. Y'all stand in the dust, watching from the edges, hoping for a piece of discarded bread or a blessing shouted in your direction. Y'all cheer because if you don't, people will notice. And if they notice you too much, they'll question who you are. You are no one. Just one more sweating back in a world ruled by people y'all never touch and gods y'all never understand. And yet you keep going, because you have to. Because even in a world that breaks your body, buries your name, and sells your afterlife to the highest bidder, you endure. Your fever finally fades, but it leaves a hollowness in its place, like the gods reached inside you and scooped something out. There's no time to recover, no soft hands, no nurse to dab your brow with a cool cloth. Rest is for the rich. You wake up the next morning to the sound of yelling. Your neighbor's son is being beaten for stealing a turnip from a priest's field. He's 10 years old. You don't intervene, you can't. Justice here isn't about fairness, it's about status. The law of Mott, the divine order, is supposed to ensure balance in the universe. But in truth, Mott only works when you're on top. For everyone else, it means submission, obedience. If you're a farmer and a noble accuses you of lying, you're whipped. If you're a woman and a man claims you defied him, you're silenced. Even your own household is truly yours. The roof you sleep under belongs to your elder brother. If you're a woman, it belongs to your husband or your father or your husband's father. Ownership is a trickle-down affair. You can grow crops, raise animals, even bake the finest bread in the village. But you don't own the land or the oven or the flyer. The gods do, the priests do. You just borrow everything until you're replaced. And if you're a woman, your life is a box. Marriage is expected young, 12 or 13, if your family can find a dowry. If not, you stay and work, fetching water, weaving linen, grinding barley with stones until your hands blister and your fingernails split. You bleed and you work. You give birth and you work. There is no maternity leave. There are no midwives unless you can afford them. And childbirth is war, a gamble, a sacred terror. You squat over bricks smeared with goose fat, surrounded by women singing protective spells to tower it, the hippo, goddess of childbirth. If you're lucky, the child breathes. If you're very lucky, you live too. If you die, they bury you with amulets made from crocodile teeth. If your baby dies, no one mentions it after a day or two. Life is short. You move on, or you break. Some women become priestesses, singers in temples, or weavers for the royal household. But these are rare, prestigious roles, offered to daughters of scribes and priests, not field hands. For most, your worth is measured by your fertility and your obedience. You bear children, grind grain, and carry water until your back curves like a question mark, and your teeth fall out from sand in the bread. Yet there's a strange power in surviving. You know the herbs that numb pain. You can thread a spindle faster than any boy. You've pulled leeches from your brother's back and boiled donkey dung to treat infections. You've seen gods in your dreams and bled under the full moon. You understand that endurance isn't weakness, it's the only form of strength you're allowed. And the temple, that's another world entirely. A city within a city. Its walls are massive, inscribed with hieroglyphs that shimmer in the sunstrees of gods who created the world, swallowed it, and birthed it again. Inside, priests move like ghosts, heads shaved, skin perfumed. They spend hours chanting to statues, pouring milk over stone feet, burning incense so thick it makes your eyes sting from outside the gates. You think they are holy, untouchable, but you've heard rumors. Behind those sacred doors where commoners aren't allowed, politics fester like a wound. High priests fight for power. Bribes change hands like bread. The god's will is interpreted by the loudest voice or the heaviest coin. The statue of Ammon might nod slightly during a festival procession, signaling divine approval of the pharaoh. But you know the men behind the statue are sweating, pushing it by hand, swaying it just enough to give the crowd something to believe in. It's all an illusion, and still you believe. You believe in something. You have to. Maybe it's Mott. Maybe it's your ancestors. Maybe it's the idea that your soul, the Ka, will live on, that the next life will be gentler, that the gods will see your pain and finally reward you with peace. But that's a dangerous hope. Hope makes you vulnerable. Hope makes you think you matter. And in ancient Egypt, if you're not royalty, not a scribe, not a priest, not a soldier, you're dust. You are born to serve, to sweat, to dig the earth and carry stones, and pass nameless into the soil. Still, you rise. You wrap your body in linen. You step outside. The sun burns your face. The Nile moves slowly. You hear the cry of an ibis overhead. And you go on, because the worst truth of all, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. But the people who did, they lasted for thousands of years. And that's the brutal irony. You, with all your modern comforts, air conditioning, running water, and instant medical care, might falter in yours. But the farmers, the laborers, the women grinding grain under the blazing sun, the children carrying heavy jars before they even fully learned to walk, they endured. Day after scorching day, year after year, through droughts that withered the crops and floods that drowned the fields, through plagues that wiped out entire villages and political upheavals that crushed hopes beneath new rulers. They lived in a world where every breath was a gift, every meal uncertain, and every wound a possible death sentence. Their bodies were temples of pain and perseverance, their spirits hammered by hardship but shaped by unyielding resolve. Imagine waking up, not to the sound of an alarm or the comfort of a warm bed, but to the cold Nile mist, the stench of manure, and the relentless demand to work, no exceptions. Imagine knowing your every move is watched, every word recorded by scribes who could damn or save you with a single mark on papyrus. Imagine the fear that your neighbors might accuse you of blasphemy, the terror of a sudden illness that no healer can cure, and the loneliness of knowing your afterlife depends entirely on the whim of gods and the strength of your family's offerings. It's a world that crushes the weak, yes, but it also forges the strong. And while you might not survive a day, the legacy of those who did is everywhere. The pyramids, towering and eternal, built by hands like yours and mine. The hieroglyphs telling stories of gods and kings. The art and poetry that still speaks to us millennia later. So the next time you think about stepping back into time, remember this. Ancient Egypt wasn't a land of golden splendor for most. It was a crucible, a test of endurance where only the toughest souls survived and thrived against all odds. But even in the harshest days, life in ancient Egypt wasn't just suffering and survival. It was also filled with moments of joy, community, and resilience that kept the spirit alive. The market squares bustled with vendors shouting the prices of fresh fish and fragrant spices. Children played games with sticks and stones along the Nile's banks, their laughter carrying over the rush of water. Families gathered in the evenings, sharing simple meals of bread, onions, and beer, telling stories of gods and heroes, weaving the fabric of culture that connected them across generations. Music echoed through the village. Lyres and flutes played at festivals, during harvests, and even at funerals, reminding everyone of the cycle of life and death. Women sang songs while weaving or grinding grain, their voices rising above the clatter of tools. The scent of lotus blossoms and burning incense softened the dryness of the desert air, offering small comfort in a world often cruel and unforgiving. Community was everything. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing what little they had during times of scarcity. The strong protected the weak. The elders passed down wisdom to the young. Rituals and festivals weren't just religious obligations. They were vital moments of connection, hope, and renewal. Yet, beneath the surface of daily life, the reality was clear. You had to be tough, cunning, and adaptable to survive. The Nile's floods could bring either life, giving water, or devastating destruction. The social order was rigid and unforgiving, but it also provided a structure that held society together through chaos. Each person, no matter how small their role, was part of a larger story woven into the tapestry of a civilization that would echo through time. So why wouldn't you last a day in ancient Egypt? Because you'd struggle with the weight of the world pressing down on your shoulders, the relentless demands of survival, and the ever-present threat of disease, hunger, and violence. You'd be lost in a system that offers no second chances and little mercy. But the people who did last, they built monuments to eternity, crafted art that still captivates, and lived lives of fierce, unbreakable spirit. They endured not just because they had to, but because they found reason, however small, to keep moving forward. But here's the thing. Surviving ancient Egypt wasn't just about enduring hardship or obeying order. It required mastering a complex dance between faith, tradition, and sheer grit. Imagine waking up before dawn, when the sky is still a soft purple haze, knowing you must carry heavy jars of water from the Nile before the sun's heat becomes unbearable. You'll wear rough linen, woven tightly to protect your skin from sand and insects, and sandals made from palm fibers that fray after weeks of use. You'll greet the day with prayers to the sun god Ra, asking for protection against the desert's dangers and for strength to complete your tasks. But your faith is a double-edged sword. If you forget a ritual or offend a god, whether intentionally or by accident, disaster can strike. Crops fail, animals die, illness spreads, and your neighbors will whisper that you've brought misfortune upon the village. The social structure is rigid. Your position, farmer, craftsman, servant, defines your life's path. Moving beyond your birth status is nearly impossible. Education is a privilege of the elite, scribes who hold the power to write and record history. For the average person, knowledge comes through oral tradition, hard labor, and watching the cycles of the land and sky. Food is simple but precious. Bread made from barley or emmer wheat is a staple, along with onions, garlic, lentils, and fish from the Nile. Meat is a luxury reserved for festivals or the wealthy. Water is life, but it also carries risks. Parasites, disease, and contamination are constant threats. Bathing is a ritual of cleanliness and purity, especially before religious ceremonies, but daily hygiene can be difficult with scarce resources. Women face particular challenges. Their lives revolve around family, but they also manage households, prepare food, spin and weave linen, and care for children and the elderly. Marriage is central, but divorce is possible, though often difficult. Women could own property and engage in business, but social expectations often limited their freedom. Yet, amid these struggles, Egyptians found joy in art, music, storytelling, and festivals. They painted vivid scenes on tomb walls, carved intricate jewelry, and built temples that still inspire awe today. They believed in an afterlife where the soul could live forever, provided the body was preserved and the proper rituals performed. If you were to wake up in ancient Egypt, would you survive? Could you learn the rituals, endure the labor, and navigate the complex social web? Probably not. The world they lived in demanded resilience unlike anything we experience today. It was a place where gods and men collided daily, where every breath was a blessing and a challenge. But perhaps the most unforgiving test of all was the constant presence of death, not just the fear of it, but the reality of it weaving through every part of daily life. Infant mortality was high. Many children never reached their 5th birthday. Diseases like dysentery, malaria, and tuberculosis were invisible killers, spreading silently through crowded homes and bustling markets. There was no cure for infections that modern antibiotics easily treat, and wounds often turned deadly from simple contamination. When death came, it wasn't just an end, but a complex ritual that revealed much about your place in society. If you were wealthy, elaborate mummification ensured your body would be preserved for the afterlife. Priests performed intricate ceremonies, reciting spells to protect your soul as it journeyed through the underworld. Your tomb was filled with treasures, food, and even statues to serve you beyond death. For the average person, things were harsher. Burial was often quick, and simplest sometimes just a pit in the sand with a basic covering. Your name might be spoken once, then forgotten. Without a proper burial or remembrance, the Egyptians believed your soul would fade away, trapped between worlds. And yet, the Egyptians didn't just fear death, they celebrated life. Festivals like the Sed festival renewed the king's power, while harvest festivals honored the gods who controlled the seasons. Music, dance, and feasting broke the monotony of hard labor, reminding everyone that joy was possible even in the harshest conditions. The Nile, with its predictable flooding, was both giver and taker. It shaped the calendar, the economy, and even the mythology. Every year, people waited anxiously for its waters to rise, knowing that too little meant famine, and too much meant destruction. To live in ancient Egypt was to accept a delicate balance between life and death, chaos and order, gods and men. It required knowing your place, respecting the invisible forces that governed everything, and finding strength in community, tradition, and faith. So, while you might not last a day in this world, those who did generation after generation left behind a legacy carved in stone, painted on tomb walls, and whispered through time. Their endurance, ingenuity, and belief in something beyond themselves continue to fascinate us, reminding us that survival isn't just about strength, but about hope, resilience, and the stories we tell to keep the darkness at bay. But surviving ancient Egypt was just a matter of physical endurance. It was also a constant mental battle against fear, superstition, and the ever-watchful eyes of society. Gossip spread like wildfire through villages and towns, and accusations of witchcraft or impiety could ruin lives overnight. People believed that misfortune, failed crops, sickness, accidents, were punishments from the gods or curses from jealous neighbors. Trust was a precious commodity, often in short supply. Imagine the pressure of walking through crowded marketplaces, where strangers silently judge you. A slight misstep, a wrong word, or even an ill-timed sneeze could lead to suspicion. Everyone watched for signs of disrespect to the gods or the pharaoh. Because blasphemy wasn't just spiritual, it was political treason. Priests and officials enforced the laws of Mot, the cosmic order, with ruthless efficiency. They were the guardians of both religion and state, and crossing them meant public humiliation, fines, or worse. Children learned early that obedience meant survival. They were trained not only in the skills of farming, craftsmanship, or scribble work, but also in the art of self-preservation, knowing when to speak and when to be silent, how to navigate the complex hierarchy of family and community, and how to appeal to the gods for mercy. Yet, within these strict boundaries, life bloomed. You would witness weddings filled with music and dancing, couples exchanging gifts of jewelry and fine linens. You would see artisans sculpting beautiful statues, painting murals rich with color and meaning, and writing poetry that celebrated love, the seasons, and the gods themselves. Even in hardship, people sought beauty and meaning. In the end, the question is just whether you would last a day in ancient Egypt, but how those who did survive managed to find light in the shadows, to build civilization amid deserts and rivers, and to create a world so enduring that thousands of years later, we still stand in awe of their achievements. But surviving in ancient Egypt also meant accepting a life intertwined with ritual and superstition that governed every moment. Before you even stepped outside your home, you might perform small offerings to household gods like Bes or Taweret, protectors of family and fertility, hoping to shield yourself from evil spirits lurking in shadows and desert winds. Children were often given amulets, tiny tokens carved from stone or faience, designed to ward off the evil eye or poisonous snakes. Every action carried weight. Eating the wrong food on a certain day, speaking out of turn, or neglecting a daily prayer could invite misfortune. The boundary between the mundane and the divine was thin. Gods were present everywhere. In the river, the fields, the grain, even in the stars above. To ignore them was to invite disaster. Yaud quickly learned that the pharaoh was more than a rule, was a living god, the bridge between earth and the heavens. His word was law, his favor essential. Commoners like you never met him, but his presence was felt everywhere, from the grand temples with towering obelisks to the smallest household shrines. Prayers, festivals, and offerings centered around maintaining his divine order. To question him, or to even harbor doubt, was dangerous. Despite these restrictions, ancient Egyptians found ways to express individuality and creativity. Artisans signed their work, families told stories of personal heroism, and local festivals allowed communities to celebrate their unique traditions. Humor and music filled the streets during market days, and poetry captured the complexities of love, loss, and faith. Still, your day life would be a relentless test of endurance, faith, and adaptability. You'd be caught in a world where every grain of sand held meaning, where survival depended on respecting force is far larger than your soul, and where failure meant more than just hardship. It meant oblivion. So, as you imagine stepping back in time to that ancient world, remember, it's not just the heat, the labor, or the strict social codes that would overwhelm you. It's the totality of a life lived under the watchful eyes of gods and kings, where every breath was both a gift and a challenge. But even if you somehow manage to navigate the endless challenge of daily life of grueling work, the harsh laws, the constant need to appease the gods, there was still one final test that awaited everyone: death and what came after. The ancient Egyptians believed that life was just one chapter in an eternal journey. The real challenge began after your heart stopped beating. Your soul would face the terrifying judgment in the Hall of Mot, where the god Anubis would weigh your heart against a feather representing truth and justice. If your heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by Ammit, the soul-eating demon, and your existence would be wiped away, leaving no hope for eternal life. But if you passed the test, you would enter the field of reeds of paradise that mirrored the best of your earthly life. Because of this, death wasn't something to fear alone. It was a powerful motivator. People spent years preparing their bodies and their soul-saving food offerings, commissioning tomb paintings, and memorizing spells from the Book of the Dead to protect them on their journey. But the resources for such preparations were limited to the wealthy. For commoners, a simple burial meant risking oblivion. So, your existence in ancient Egypt was like walking a razor's edge, between life and death, order and chaos, hope and despair. Every action mattered, every prayer counted, every relationship shaped your fate. Could you live under such pressure? Could you thrive in a world where gods were real, where your social status was fixed, and where survival was never guaranteed? The truth is, most people didn't just survive, they endured, adapted, and found meaning despite everything. And that resilience is why their civilization lasted thousands of years, and still captivates us today. But for you, stepping into that ancient world, it would be a trial unlike any other. You wouldn't last a day because you'd never be ready for the weight of history pressing down, the relentless demands of survival, and the invisible threads of faith and fear pulling every moment of your life. And even as you wrestle with all of these harsh realities, unyielding customs, relentless toil, I'd also discover moments where humanity shone brightest. The simple joys, a child's laughter echoing by the Nile, a shared meal during a cool evening, the rhythm of drums at a festival, the artistry of a finely crafted amulet tucked safely into your pocket. These fragments of light gave meaning and comfort amid the struggle. You'd see neighbors helping one another during planting and harvest, families gathered to honor the dead with songs and offerings, and communities united by a shared belief in cosmic balance that demanded not just obedience, but also kindness, fairness, and truth. The world was unforgiving, yes, but it was also full of people who loved, hoped, and dreamed just like you. So, while it's true that you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, understanding why pulls back the curtain on a civilization built on resilience, faith, and a deep, sometimes painful humanity. It reminds us that the greatest test of survival is not simply enduring hardship, but finding purpose and connection in a world that constantly tests you. But let's not forget the incredible ingenuity that ancient Egyptians harnessed to carve out life from the desert and the Nile's unpredictable floods. You'd witness how they mastered irrigation, channeling the river's waters through canals and basins to turn arid soil into fertile farmland. You'd marvel at the architectural feats, pyramids rising like mountains of stone, temples adorned with columns painted in vivid blues and reds, and statues so lifelike they seemed to breathe. This wasn't a civilization of helpless victims. It was a society of innovators, artists, priests, and laborers who understood the delicate dance between nature and the divine. They developed writing system hieroglyphs that preserved their stories, laws, and prayers for millennia. They mapped the stars, built calendars, and celebrated the cycles of life with festivals that lit up the night with music, dance, and joy. So while you might struggle to survive a day under the scorching sun, with dust in your lungs and burdens on your back, the people who lived there thrived by adapting, cooperating, and believing in something greater than themselves. They created a legacy that still shapes our understanding of history, religion, and human potential. That's the paradox of ancient Egypt, a land of extremes, where hardship and beauty, faith and fear, power and vulnerability existed side by side. And that's why, though you wouldn't last a day, the echoes of their lives still call to us, reminding us of the strength it takes to endure and the stories that survive through time. And so, as you imagine stepping into their sandals, walking along the dusty paths of Memphis or Thebes, you begin to understand the true magnitude of what it took just to exist in ancient Egypt. Every breath, every meal, every interaction was a negotiation with a world that demanded respect, obedience, and strength. The towering monuments that inspire awe today were built on the backs of countless unnamed men and women who toiled relentlessly, driven by faith and duty. You'd have to learn quickly how to read the signs in the sky, how to honor the gods in your daily routines, how to work the land with precision timed to the rhythms of the Nile's flooding. You'd have to master the arts of patience and endurance, of hope in the face of uncertainty, and of community when isolation threatened. Because the truth is, surviving wasn't just about physical toughness. It was about mental resilience and spiritual conviction. It was about accepting that your life was part of a larger cosmic order, that your actions rippled beyond your own existence, shaping the future and the memories left behind. And maybe that's the most powerful reason why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. Not because the challenges were insurmountable, but because living there required a way of being so fundamentally different from our modern world, so deeply rooted in a sacred, unyielding way of life, that stepping into it without that mindset would be overwhelming, even impossible. So, next time you look at those towering pyramids or the intricate hieroglyphs, remember, they are not just relics. They are monuments to a people who lived, loved, suffered, and persevered in a world that tested them every single day. And in understanding their story, we glimpse the incredible resilience of the human spiritone that, while it might not let you last a day in ancient Egypt, continues to inspire us all today. And finally, while the grandeur of the pharaohs and their monuments often captures our imagination, it's important to remember that most Egyptians lived lives far from the marble halls and golden thrones. You wouldn't be a king or priest. You'd be a farmer planting grain in cracked earth, a potter shaping clay under the relentless sun, or a laborer hauling heavy stones along the Nile's banks. Your hands would be calloused, your back bent, In your days measured by the cycles of planting, harvest, and prayer, Yaud have little time for rest, and even less for complaining, because survival depended on cooperation and hard work. Yaud have to respect the social hierarchy, obey the laws set by the pharaoh, and participate in community rituals that reinforced order and stability. Rebellion was dangerous and justice swift. Punishments for crimes could be harsh, sometimes deadly. But within this demanding existence, Yaud find moments of celebration, music, dance, storytelling, and religious festivals that lifted spirits and strengthened bonds. Yaud be part of a vibrant culture that valued family, honor, and the hope of eternal life. So, when you ask why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, it's not just the heat or the work that would overwhelm you. It's the total immersion into a world so different, so strict, and so interconnected that the comforts and freedoms we take for granted today would be utterly foreign. Yet, in those challenges lies a profound lesson about resilience, faith, and the enduring human spiritone that reminds us how far we've come and how much the past continues to shape who we are. But even as the sun set over the desert horizon and the cool night air settled in, your day in ancient Egypt wouldn't truly end. The evening brought its own rituals and responsibilities. Families gathered around small fires or oil lamps made from stone, sharing stories passed down from generations. The stars above, same ones the priests charted to predict the Nile's flooding and divine the future, watched silently as you prepared for rest. Though sleep was often uneasy, haunted by worries of the next day's demands, you might hear the distant sounds of temple chants or the crackling of torches as priests conducted nocturnal rites to appease gods and protect the city from evil spirits. Even the dark held meaninger reminder that in this world, everything was alive, sacred, and connected. And while your body longed for comfort, your mind would remain alert, shaped by a lifetime of knowing that survival depended on vigilance, faith, and community. Every day in ancient Egypt was a cycle of labor, devotion, and hopia, fragile balance, maintained by millions of hands and hearts. So, while you may not last a day in this ancient world, understanding its depths reveals something greater, a testament to human endurance, creativity, and belief that still resonates thousands of years later. And as dawn breaks again over the endless sands, the cycle begins again, offering no rest for the weary, no pause for the unprepared. Each sunrise brings the weight of expectations, the demands of survival, and the unyielding presence of the gods watching from every corner. Yaud have to rise again, ready to face the scorching sun, the biting sandstorms, and the constant reminder that life in ancient Egypt was a relentless test of strength and spirit. But beyond the hardship, there is an undeniable beauty of civilization that transformed deserts into fields, stones into temples, and myths into legacies. The people of ancient Egypt taught us that even in the harshest conditions, life can flourish through faith, community, and determination. So, while you may not last a day walking their dusty paths or working their fields, the story of ancient Egypt lives on reminding us that survival is about more than just enduring. It's about finding meaning, purpose, and hope in a world that never stops demanding everything from you. And as you reflect on all this, it becomes clear. Ancient Egypt was not just a place frozen in time. It was a living, breathing world, vibrant with beliefs, challenges, and dreams so different from our own that stepping into it would feel like entering another reality altogether. The dust in your lungs, the scorching sun on your skin, the weight of tradition pressing down on your shouldersole would remind you constantly that here, survival was not a given, but a daily victory. Yaud quickly realized that this civilization, built along the banks of the life-giving Nile, demanded more than just strength. It required humility before force, as you could not see, respect for a social order that shaped your identity, and faith in a destiny that stretched beyond the grave. So no, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. not because you lack toughness or will, but because to live, they're meant to be part of a grand story woven from devotion, labor, fear, and hope. It was a world where every breath was a prayer, every act carried meaning, and every life was a thread in the tapestry of eternity. But here's the final truth. Ancient Egypt wasn't designed for outsiders, for those unfamiliar with its ways and rhythms. Its world was built on a delicate balance of ritual, hierarchy, and belief that took a lifetime to understand. And even then, survival was never guaranteed. The desert sands were unforgiving, the social structures rigid, and the gods demanding. If you stumbled into this world unprepared, you'd quickly be overwhelmed, lost in a maze of customs, overwhelmed by the physical demands, and vulnerable to dangers both seen and unseen. You'd struggle to grasp the meaning behind the elaborate ceremonies, the cryptic hieroglyphs, and the unspoken rules governing daily life. Without that deep-rooted connection to their culture and faith, you'd be adrift. But that's also what makes ancient Egypt so fascinating. It challenges us to step outside ourselves, to imagine a life so different yet so profoundly human. It forces us to confront what it really means to endure, to believe, and to leave a mark on the world. And that journey through stories, artifacts, and ancient ruins, where we truly connect with the people who lived thousands of years before us. It's in piecing together their lives from fragments of pottery, faded paintings, and towering monuments that we come to understand their world wasn't just about gods and pharaohs, but about ordinary people struggling, loving, and hoping just like us. You'd see how they celebrated births and mourned deaths, how they worked side by side under the blazing sun, and how they dreamed of a better life beyond the Nile. You'd witness the deep bonds of family and community that held them together, and the unshakable faith that gave them strength in the face of uncertainty. So maybe you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt because you weren't born into that world. But through learning their story, you keep their spirit alive. You become part of the long chain of humanity that stretches across time, reminding us all that survival is about more than just enduring. It's about connection, meaning, and the stories we tell. And in that way, their legacy lives are not just in dusty tombs or museum halls, but in the way we see ourselves and our place in history. And as you carry their story forward, you begin to see that the lessons of ancient Egypt extend far beyond its deserts and pyramids. They speak to something universal: our need to find order in chaos, to seek meaning in mystery, and to build communities that outlast our own lifetimes. The Egyptians mastered this in a world vastly different from ours, yet their struggles and triumphs feel surprisingly familiar. So, while the thought of surviving a day in their world might seem impossible, embracing their history allows us to appreciate the strength and resilience that define humanity across ages. It reminds us that every civilization, no matter how ancient, was built by people who faced uncertainty with courage, hardship with hope, and the unknown with faith. In the end, the reason you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt is not just because of its harsh realities, but because stepping into their world demands a mindset forged by generations of living in harmony with forces greater than themselves. And though that mindset may be foreign to us, it offers a powerful reminder that survival is as much about spirit as it is about flesh. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep connecting, because through stories like these, the past remains alive, and we find ways to endure, no matter the world we live in. And maybe that's the most incredible part. Ancient Egypt's story is just locked away in history books or buried beneath layers of sand. It lives in the questions we ask, the mysteries we chase, and the wonder we feel when we look up at the stars or stand before a towering monument built thousands of years ago. Their world challenge is us to imagine life beyond our own time, to empathize with people who faced unimaginable hardships, and to recognize the resilience that defines us all. So, while you might not last a day in ancient Egypt, you can carry a piece of it with you, a reminder that humanity's story is one of enduring spirit, relentless creativity, and the unbreakable bond that tie us together across millennia. And that connection, across time and culture, is the true treasure of ancient Egypt, to legacy that no desert storm or passing century can ever erase. So, as you wrap your mind around why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, remember this. It wasn't just the physical challenges, heat, the hard labor, the dangers lurking everywhere, that made survival so difficult. It was the sheer weight of a civilization built on faith, hierarchy, and an unyielding connection to the divine and cosmic order. To live there meant submitting your very existence to a world far stranger and more demanding than anything we experience today. Yet, through all that, they built something extraordinary. They created a civilization that not only endured for thousands of years, but also laid the foundation for much of what we understand about art, architecture, governance, and spirituality. Their legacy reminds us that survival is more than just getting through the day. It's about contributing to something greater than ourselves, about finding meaning even in the toughest conditions. So, while you may not last a day in ancient Egypt, the story of those who did, ordinary people and pharaohs alike, continues to inspire and challenge us. And in learning from them, we carry forward a timeless lesson that the human spirit, when faced with adversity, can create wonders that echo through eternity. And that's why diving into ancient Egypt's world is just a lesson in history. It's an exploration of what it means to be human. It forces us to confront our own limits, fears, and beliefs, while also reminding us of our incredible capacity to adapt, endure, and dream. So next time you see those magnificent pyramids or hear tales of pharaohs and gods, remember the millions of lives woven into that story, sweat, the prayers, the laughter, and the tears that made it all possible. You wouldn't last a day there, but through their story, you become part of something far greater, a shared journey across time that connects us to the past and shapes how we understand ourselves today. And that connection, that's the true magic of ancient Egypt. And as you continue to explore, you'll find that ancient Egypt's influence reaches far beyond its own time. Its art inspires modern creativity, its mysteries spark endless curiosity, and its stories remind us that even in the harshest environments, humanity can build beauty, culture, and meaning. Every hieroglyph carved in stone, every carefully crafted tomb, every festival dedicated to the gods is a testament to a people who refused to be defeated by their world. So while you might not last a day walking the dusty streets of an ancient Egyptian city, by understanding their lives, struggles, and beliefs, you gain a deeper appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit, and that appreciation can inspire you to face your own challenges with courage and curiosity. Imagine waking up before dawn to the soft light spilling over the Nile, the air thick with humidity, and the scent of mud and papyrus. Your day begins not with leisure, but with a ritual, a quick offering to the household gods, a prayer for protection against the unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. Then comes the relentless labor, tending to fields that depend entirely on the Nile's unpredictable floodwaters. Without modern machinery, every seed planted and every stalk harvested demands backbreaking work under a blazing sun that spares no one. You're part of a tightly woven social fabric where your place is predetermined by birth. The pharaoh sits at the top, a living god whose favor dictates your chances of survival and prosperity. The priests wield immense power, controlling knowledge of the divine and the afterlife. Common folk like you have little say, expected to obey laws and customs without question, or risk harsh punishment. Health is a constant battle. Without advanced medicine, a simple infection or a bite from a venomous snake could be fatal. Parasites infest the water and the land, bringing diseases unknown to modern science. Hygiene is rudimentary, and the stench of the crowded cities mingles with the ever-present dust and smoke from cooking fires. Food is scarce during certain times of the year, and famine is a very real threat. The bread you eat is coarse, and your diet lacks variety. Luxury is reserved for the elite, while you and your family survive on what the land and river provide. And yet, despite the hardships, life is rich with meaning. Every act is imbued with religious significance, from the simplest gesture of pouring water to the elaborate ceremonies that honor gods and ancestors. The weight of superstition permeates daily existence. Amulets protect you from evil spirits, spells guard your sleep. Strict observance of taboos shields you from divine wrath. Education is a privilege for the few, and literacy is rare. For most, knowledge is past oral histories of gods, heroes, and the afterlife, shaping your understanding of the world and your place within it. Social interactions are governed by strict etiquette. Respect for elders and those of higher status is mandatory. Hospitality is a sacred duty, but strangers are viewed with suspicion. Your community provides support but also enforces conformity, leaving little room for personal freedom. As evening falls, you join your family in preparing simple meals, sharing stories, and performing rituals to honor the deceased. Sleep offers little respite, as dreams might be messages from the gods, warnings to heed or promise is to hold on to. Night brings its own dangers, predators prowling near homes, thieves seeking easy prey, and the ever-present fear of curses and malevolent spirits. Yet, through it all you persist. You find joy in small moments, a child's laughter, the blooming of lotus flowers along the riverbank, the rhythmic beat of drums during festivals. These threads of hope and community bind you to a civilization that, despite its demands, fosters connection and resilience. Understanding this world, with all its complexities and contradictions, reveals why stepping into it unprepared would be overwhelming. It's a place where survival is not just on physical strength, but on unwavering faith, social harmony, and an intimate relationship with force is beyond human control. Living in ancient Egypt also meant navigating a world where every moment was intertwined with the spiritual realm. The gods were not distant beings but active participants in daily life. You would have to constantly honor them through prayers, offerings, and rituals. Missing a ceremony or neglecting a shrine could invite misfortune not only on yourself, but on your entire community. The concept of Ma'at, divine order of truth, balance, and justice, was the backbone of society. Upholding Ma'at wasn't optional. It was a sacred duty that shaped everything from governance to personal behavior. Imagine the pressure of this invisible but ever-present force shaping your decisions. The way you treated your family, how you conducted business, even how you spoke to neighbors. The idea that your actions had cosmic significance would be both empowering and terrifying. You wouldn't just be responsible for yourself, you'd be accountable to the gods, the pharaoh, and the very fabric of the universe. At the same time, your existence would be punctuated by elaborate festivals and celebrations, where the harshness of life briefly gave way to joy, music, dance, and communal feasting. These events weren't just entertainment, they were vital expressions of faith and unity, reaffirming the bonds between people and their gods. You'd participate in rituals like the Apet festival, which celebrated the rejuvenation of the pharaoh's divine power, or the Festival of the Valley, where families honored their ancestors with offerings and prayers. But alongside the communal life, you'd also face personal struggles. Childbirth was risky, diseases were common, and life expectancy was short. Education was limited, and upward mobility nearly impossible for most. Women, while respected in many aspects, were still largely confined to domestic roles, and social status dictated your opportunities and freedoms. Surviving meant mastering the rhythms of the Nile, knowing when to plant, when to harvest, and how to prepare for the annual floods that could both nurture and devastate. It meant enduring the relentless sun and the biting insects, living in homes made from mud bricks that offered little protection from the elements. You'd share cramped spaces with family members, livestock, and pests alike. In this environment, community ties were crucial. Neighbors depended on each other for labor, protection, and sharing resources. Gossip and reputation mattered deeply, as social harmony was essential to avoid conflict and maintain order. As you can see, lasting even a single day in ancient Egypt demanded far more than physical endurance. It required mental toughness, spiritual commitment, social awareness, and an acceptance of a world where the sacred and the mundane were inseparable. This complex tapestry of life filled with hardship, beauty, faith, and communities why you wouldn't last a day there without being fully immersed in its culture and beliefs. And yet, it's also what makes ancient Egypt so endlessly fascinating. A civilization that thrived for thousands of years by balancing the demands of survival with a profound connection to the divine and to each other. Beyond the physical and spiritual demands, daily life in ancient Egypt was also a lesson in adaptability and resourcefulness. You'd have to navigate the complexities of a society that, while seemingly rigid, was constantly evolving, innovating irrigation techniques to tame the Nile's floods, developing intricate systems of writing to record laws, trade, and stories, and mastering arts that transformed simple materials into objects of lasting beauty. Trade was vital, and you might find yourself bartering goods like grain, linen, or pottery at bustling markets filled with merchants from distant lands. Exotic products such as incense, gold, and cedarwood flowed along caravan routes, connecting Egypt to the wider world. Yet with trade came risks, bandits, political intrigue, and shifting alliances that could turn neighbor into enemy overnight. You'd also have to be keenly aware of your place within the social hierarchy. Pharaohs and nobles lived lives of luxury, surrounded by servants, elaborate jewelry, and fine clothing, while the majority of Egyptians toiled endlessly for basic sustenance. Craftsmen, scribes, and priests occupied middle ranks, each playing a crucial role in maintaining the state and religion. Your interactions with these groups required diplomacy and respect, as the balance of power could affect your very survival. Education, though rare, was a prized tool for social advancement. If you were lucky enough to attend a scribe school, you'd learn hieroglyphics, an art form as much as a practical skill, and gain access to opportunities that most could only dream of. But the learning was harsh and discipline strict. Mistakes in writing were severely punished, reflecting the high value placed on accuracy and knowledge. Your relationship with death would also shape your world. Egyptians believed strongly in the afterlife, continuation of existence beyond this world. Preparing for it was a lifelong endeavor involving elaborate burial practices, mummification, and the provision of goods and spells to protect the soul. The fear of dying unprepared, condemned to wander in darkness, would weigh heavily on your mind. In this context, every decision mattered. The clothes you wore, the food you ate, the words you spoke, all were threads in a delicate tapestry, linking you to the divine, your ancestors, and your community. To survive and thrive, you'd need to develop a resilience that balanced acceptance with determination, faith with pragmatism. The sun might scorch, the laws might be strict, and the gods might be demanding. But within this demanding world, people found joy, created art, nurtured families, and built a civilization whose echoes we still hear today. And as you immerse yourself deeper into this ancient world, you begin to realize that time itself moved differently in ancient Egypt. The past, present, and future were entwined through myths, rituals, and the ever-flowing Nile. History wasn't just recorded, it was lived and relived in ceremonies that bound generations together. Pharaohs were seen as divine intermediaries, their reigns marking eras of cosmic significance. The construction of grand monuments like the pyramids and temples was more than an architectural feat. It was an act of spiritual preservation, a way to secure eternity for both the ruler and people. Imagine the sheer scale of these projects. Thousands of workers, from skilled artisans to laborers, toiling under the watchful eyes of overseers, driven by both necessity and devotion. Your hands would know the roughness of stone, the weight of tools, the exhaustion of endless labor. Yet, these monumental achievements gave people a sense of purpose and belonging, tying their daily struggles to something far greater than themselves. The arts flourished in this context. Music, dance, poetry, and painting were not just entertainment, but essential expressions of cultural identity and religious devotion. Colorful frescoes depicted gods, pharaohs, and scenes from everyday life with symbolic precision, telling stories meant to guide and inspire. At the same time, laws and justice were paramount. The concept of Ma'at meant that fairness and order were sacred duties of both rulers and citizens. Disputes were settled by officials who upheld these principles, and punishments for crimes could be severe, reflecting the importance of social stability. Living in this system meant walking a fine line where a single misstep could lead to ruin. Family life, though central, was also shaped by these pressures. Marriages were often arranged to strengthen social ties, and children were raised with a strong sense of duty and respect. Women had certain rights, including owning property and managing household affairs, but their freedoms varied depending on status and location. As night fell over the Nile, the world transformed again. The stars, believed to be the souls of ancestors or manifestations of gods, guided travelers and priests alike. Temples glowed with flickering lamps, and prayers echoed softly through halls carved from stone. Sleep might bring dreams interpreted as messages from the divine, offering hope or warning. All of this unrelenting labor, the intricate belief systems, the social structures, the connection to nature and the cosmos, created a life both harsh and profound. Without understanding and embracing these complexities, surviving a day would be nearly impossible. But within this demanding existence, humanity's remarkable capacity to create meaning and beauty shines through. The legacy of ancient Egypt is a testament to that spirit, a civilization that, despite its challenges, reached for the eternal and left behind wonders that continue to awe and inspire. And so, imagining a single day, there is not just a glimpse into survival, it's an invitation to experience a world where every breath was charged with purpose, every action echoed in eternity, and every life was a thread in the grand tapestry of history still unfolding. Living in ancient Egypt would also mean grappling with the realities of a world without modern conveniences. No electricity, no running water, no hospitals, and no easy escape from danger. Imagine waking up in a small mud brick home where the only protection from the heat and sandstorms is a thin layer of plaster on the walls. Your mornings start with fetching water from the Nile or communal wells, a task that could take hours depending on your distance from the river. Food, though centered around staples like bread, onions, and fish, could be scarce, especially if the Nile's flood was poor one year. You'd have to be constantly vigilant to store enough grain for the dry months, and ensure your family doesn't go hungry. The threat of famine was ever present, and crop failures could mean catastrophe. Disease was a silent enemy. Without antibiotics or advanced medical knowledge, infections from minor wounds could turn deadly. Parasites thrived in the warm climate, and epidemics sometimes swept through villages with devastating speed. Healing rituals combined practical remedies with spiritual incantations, but their effectiveness was limited. Your clothing would be simple line and tunics or skirts that provided some relief from the heat, but offered little protection. Sand and sweat would cling to your skin, and without modern hygiene products, you'd be vulnerable to skin irritations and parasites. Social status was rigid and mobility rare. Born into a family of farmers, artisans, or laborers, your life path would largely be predetermined. Education was reserved for boys from wealthier families, who might become scribes of the few professions offering social advancement. Girls often learned household skills and helped care for younger siblings, preparing to manage their own homes. Yet, despite these hardships, ancient Egyptians found ways to celebrate life and build community. Festivals were occasions of vibrant music, dancing, and feasting, where people from all walks of life gathered to honor gods and renew social bonds. Markets bustled with activity, where goods from across the known world changed hands, spices from Arabia, gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon. Religion permeated every aspect of life, providing structure and hope. You'd carry amulets to ward off evil, consult oracles for guidance, and place great trust in the elaborate burial rituals designed to secure a safe journey to the afterlife. The promise of eternal life was a powerful motivator to live honorably and fulfill your duties. Living dated A meant constant negotiation with these realitous, unforgiving environment. The complex social web, the ever-present spiritual forces. You'd have to develop a resilience that blended physical endurance with mental and emotional strength. So while the idea of lasting a single day in ancient Egypt might seem impossible at first glance, it's this intricate dance of survival, faith, and community that made it possible for millions to thrive over thousands of years. The challenges were immense, but so was the human spirit that met them head on. And through understanding these details, you begin to see why stepping into that world would be overwhelming, disorienting, and demanding in ways few modern experiences can match. Yet, it's also what makes ancient Egypt one of the most fascinating and enduring civilizations in history, a place where survival was an art, a belief, and a way of life all at once. Beyond just survival, every action you took in ancient Egypt was tied to a deeper purpose, often linked to maintaining cosmic balance that was essential not only for society but for the universe itself. The belief that disorder or chaos could unravel the world meant that even the smallest misstep carried weighty consequences. You'd learn quickly that honesty, respect, and diligence weren't just moral ideals, but necessities for keeping your community and the gods pleased. Your work as a farmer, artisan, or laborer wasn't merely a job, it was part of a sacred duty. The crops you planted fed not just your family, but contributed to the entire kingdom's stability. The crafts you created, from pottery to jewelry, were imbued with symbolism and meant to honor the gods or prepare the dead for their journey. Even the simplest tasks were connected to the divine order. The social hierarchy also dictated your interactions. Pharaohs were revered as living gods, and their decrees shaped laws, religion, and culture. Priests controlled knowledge and rituals, often acting as intermediaries between people and gods. Commoners like you were expected to obey, support temple economies, and participate in communal events that reinforced social cohesion. Daily life also meant constant awareness of your environment. The Nile's floodwaters brought life, but also destruction if they came too early, too late, or too much. Droughts could lead to famine, and you'd have to rely on community, cooperation, and resourcefulness to survive lean times. You'd learn to read the skies, observe the behavior of animals, and listen to the stories elders told, wisdom passed down to anticipate nature's moods. On a personal level, you'd face the ever-present realities of health risks and limited medical knowledge. Illnesses that are easily treated today could be fatal then. Herbal remedies and spiritual healing went hand in hand, but without certainty. You might lose loved ones unexpectedly, deepening your reliance on religious faith and rituals that promised protection in this life and the next. Despite the hardships, moments of joy and celebration broke through. Festivals, music, storytelling, and communal feasts connected you to your neighbors and ancestors. Art and architecture expressed your culture's values and aspirations. From the simplest household shrine to the grandeur of temples and tombs. All these facets combined to create a life that was simultaneously grueling and meaningful, a life where every breath was charged with significance, and every action had ripple effects through time and space. Understanding this world helps explain why, without that cultural framework and daily immersion in its beliefs and practices, you simply wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. The challenge is we're as much about navigating a complex spiritual and social landscape as about enduring physical hardships. Yet, it's this very complexity, intertwining of the sacred and the mundane, the individual and the cosmos, had made ancient Egypt endure for millennia and continue to captivate our imagination today. The people who lived there were masters of survival, not just because they endured the harsh environment, but because they found meaning and order within each lesson that resonates across the ages. So, in the end, lasting even a single day in ancient Egypt would mean confronting a world utterly different from our own, where survival hinged on physical endurance, spiritual devotion, social obedience, and an intimate connection to force, is both natural and divine. It was a life filled with challenge, is that tested every aspect of a person's being, yet it was also a life rich with meaning, community, and purpose. While you might not last a day unprepared in that ancient world, understanding the depth of their experience allows us to appreciate the resilience and ingenuity of a civilization that shaped human history in profound ways. It's a powerful reminder that survival is never just about enduring, it's about belonging, believing, and building something that lasts beyond a lifetime. And that's why the story of ancient Egypt continues to fascinate us, inviting us to step back in time and imagine what it truly meant to live, struggle, and dream along the banks of the timeless Nile.